I am so freaking excited for today's conversation, my dear listener, because I get to introduce you to one of the coolest people out there in the spiritual space who I absolutely love, who is Katherine Wehler, who is an activation and ascension guide who assists in exploring, rediscovering, and empowering the soul's highest self and true potential. She is an astrologer of over 20 years, a human design reader of over 5 years, an Akashic Records guide, a new paradigm business coach, and the host of the Soul Rediscovery podcast. Welcome, Katherine, to the show.
Thank you. Oh my God, that was such a sweet intro.
You're so welcome. And Katherine and I had the pleasure of getting to meet in person a few weeks ago here in Philly when she was here visiting. So that was such a joy. So we shared some fun time together. And Katherine, why don't you share where? Yes.
Shout out to that salmon flatbread.
Yes. She got to experience the delicious food and the energy here in Philadelphia, which for all of you, you know, I'm a big Philly girl. So if you ever want to come visit, we love the vibes here. But Katherine, why don't you share where you're located? I know that's sort of in flux. So if you kind of want to share a little bit about what's going on in your life right now, that would be a good place for us to start.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm currently in San Diego, California. I'm a SoCal girl through and through, born and raised in Palm Springs. Not born. Why did I say that? I was born in Northern California, but raised in Palm Springs, California. And yeah, in my life right now, my personal life, at the time that we're recording this, we are just closing out Pluto in Capricorn, 16 long years of Pluto and Capricorn. Literally counting down the days. We have 6 days left. And yeah, I was just feeling in my heart like I love San Diego. I've lived here for the last 2 years. I grew up coming out here, but I love it so much that I could see myself like raising a family out here and actually like really living out here for a long time. So because I don't have anything tethering me and my business is entirely remote for the most part, I was like, let me just go travel. So that is what is up next for me. I'm gonna keep my stuff at my folks. Thankfully, they have a little room for me as a home base, and then just kind of bop around and see more people in person, like how we did.
Absolutely. And we spoke about this when we met in person, but I feel like there are so many people out there, myself included, who are craving more of that freedom to explore new places, travel more, be less tied to, a desk and your physical business career, those sorts of things, so that you can have more freedom to expand and be out there and explore.
Yeah, 100%. And, for me, like, I'm a Cancer rising, Libra moon in the fourth house at heart. Like, I need a home base, like, I need like home and family and a place to come back to. So I've learned about myself. I don't like feeling like I don't have that. I don't like feeling like I'm 100% nomadic, but I also like always need a trip too, because I'm a ninth house stellium. So
Mhm.
always need a trip, I always need, even if it's something that's like local, like I need adventure and exploration because I'm also an Aries sun. So I need like that in my life. And I think that this next chapter with my progressed moon going into Sagittarius, my Saturn return in the ninth house, and now the North Node also joining up with Saturn in the ninth house, it's feeling like a season of a little bit more like international exploration and adventure. And I've already done a lot of traveling, but truly like you can never do enough. And like the best part for me is meeting up with my friends and having those in-person relationships that you don't always get to have.
Absolutely. I love all of that so much. And I love that you shared too your astrology sun and moon and rising, because that helps us get to know you better. What is your human design type?
I am a 4/6 manifesting generator, sacral authority, non-specific manifester. Smell is my my key sense. And am I ever? I am literally like a textbook definition of not just my astrology, but my human design. I'm a 17, 18, 58, 52, right angle, incarnation cross. I was gonna say, what is the why am I spacing on the name of my incarnation cross? Anyways, COVID brain, but yeah.
And that's why we get along so well because I am a 1-3 manifesting generator, sacral authority. Yeah. I can't
Yeah.
remember the other pieces, but yeah, the
Yep.
multi passionate self.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Just trying all the things. I think about it like a little butterfly flying around, from flower to flower, getting to sample it all. Yeah.
And you are passionate about so many things when it comes to spiritual business. And one thing that we spoke about before we hit record for this episode was talking about new paradigm leadership. So I want to kind of get into all the different spaces that you focus on because I know my listener wants to learn more about astrology. She wants to learn more about human design. We can only cover so much in the span of a 1 hour episode. So let's just first start chatting about what does new paradigm leadership mean to you? And then we can kind of get into more of the nuances. We can hear about your story and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I love that. So I think the thing about new paradigm leadership, the best way that I can describe it really simply is that we're at a moment in time, which even ties into me saying, like, oh, I don't have to live in one place. I can travel and have a home base. And I think that's the beautiful thing is we're living in a time of infinite possibility. We don't have the same restrictions that we once did, right? For so many reasons in our society. And I think within that, we really truly get to be our individual selves and really truly get to show up with our individual gifts and talents in a way that we previously didn't have the luxury of doing, right? So, the way that I describe it is we're in a phase as a collective right now within the astrology, the human design mutation, all of it, where it's what the new paradigm is, which you can think about as each of us finding the shape and form of our unique puzzle piece within a larger collective puzzle, right? So it's like your unique contribution, right? The thing that you uniquely are here to be and to do and to offer to the world simply by existing, mind you. This isn't even just tied into necessarily this is just your career, right? This is how you are with your barista or your Uber driver or your family. Like, I've had clients who are going from being ancestral healers to wanting to write romance novels. And they've been asking me, like, but is that new paradigm leadership? And I'm like, but is that what your heart wants? Is that what you genuinely feel led to do? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, then yes, it is. It's not this hierarchy of, oh, one is more humanitarian than the other, or more spiritual, or more conscious, ascended, whatever word you want to use. But it's truly like, this is what makes my heart beat. This is where my gifts and talents shine. This is where I'm feeling led to. And that's, again, that shape and form of your puzzle piece that helps everybody else find the shape and form of their puzzle piece and helps us complete that larger collective puzzle. So it's truly the individual for the collective.
I'm absolutely obsessed with that. Couldn't agree more with what you said. And I'm such a huge believer in connecting with your most authentic self. And when you learn who you are, what your heart is desiring, connecting to that space of heart centered connection with self, you can begin to see the path starts to form in front of you of here's how I'm meant to be of service to myself and to others from a place of this is who I really am. And when you start operating from that space, new opportunities come forward. And that could be a spiritual business, but like you said, that could also be writing a book, or that could be creating a new service or product or offering that's here to impact others in a new way. There's so many ways that we can create or do it, but it starts from that heart-centered place of this is me and this is what I love and this is who I am. And when you create from there and be from there, it has a ripple effect that everybody else around you really responds to.
Exactly. And I think it's beautiful because we don't always know, consciously or tangibly what that is. It's like my client being like, I just want to write romance novels. And I'm like, but think about it. Maybe someone someday is going to read your romance novel and be like, this is the exact relationship that I deserve, you know? Like, this is what I've been looking for. And I know that it's possible. Right. So I think it's like, again, what I love about it is there's no wronging, right? So it's not saying, oh, because I channel or because I heal things ancestrally, like that's more important or more spiritual or conscious or ascended or again, whatever language we want to use than if I wanted to be a chocolatier. It's like you truly get to be and do anything that you want. And again, like for us, because we are in business and we work with business owners a lot, we speak more in these sort of career or leadership like terms that are more obvious, but this can even show up in who you decide to marry, or how you decide to raise your children, right? Like, again, how you decide to interact with the Trader Joe's grocer who trying to have a conversation with you and you're just trying to get home at 5 p.m. on a Friday. Like, you know? So I think that's the beauty of it is it's again, it's like who you are just in your day-to-day, moment to moment, and all the different beautiful evolutions and phases and chapters of you, not just this like one stagnant identity, but everything you can be and everything that you're here to be.
100% yes. I can't wait to chat about different ways that perhaps the listener can discover that within themselves through some of the different modalities that you use. But before we get there, I actually want to know more about Katherine and that 20-year of astrology exploration journey that you've been on.
Yeah.
How did you get here? Who was the childhood Katherine? And how did that get her here to where she is today?
Thank you. Great question.
Big question.
I love talking about myself. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, again, like actually genuinely great question because I do think it's helpful for people to know if who I am and like how I got to doing what I do because I think again, just as an Aries and Aries 10th house, which is my career and reputation, that's such a key, like my own journey, my own life, even being a sixth line, right? That's such a huge key component to even what I'm here to talk about. So I would love to answer your question. The thing to know about me is that I have channeled and seen energy and known my past lives my entire life. Like, I told my mom at 3 years old that I am God, and, um, she was like, "You mean you love God?" And I was like, "No, I am God," So, that's the thing, like, that's just always been me, right? And it was never something that I had to cultivate or work on or try to, bring more of into my life or learn how to do. It's just how I've always been. I've had to learn how to like turn it on at the grocery store, so that I don't know all the lifetimes of this random woman standing next to me in the cereal aisle. So, for me, it's like it's just that part has always been. So, as far as the astrology goes, that ties into it because when I was 7 years old, I was a very avid reader. And the other thing to know about me, and I don't mean this from an egotistical perspective or anything, it just, again, it is what it is I was kind of a prodigy. And so I was like reading, college level textbooks at 7 years old. Like it was nothing. Um, so, I was such an avid reader, and my mom would take me to this little bookstore because we didn't have a lot growing up. And I would pick out like a 50-cent book, every other week or something that I would read. And one time I picked out the Greek gods and goddesses. And usually I have it with me when I do podcasts, but I have it right over here. Like I literally still have the book. Um, and I just became obsessed. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm entirely and totally," especially Aphrodite and Athena were just like my girls. Like I was just obsessed with Aphrodite and Athena. But really, and like Persephone and just, so many stories. And from there, I got into Roman mythology, which is pretty much the same, just using different names, but slightly different. And then Egyptian mythology. So I was reading, like, again, college level textbooks on Egypt and, Egyptology and stuff. Like how, they performed sex magic and that kind of thing, right? At 7 years old. So my second grade teacher actually said to my parents, she was like, "So we got to talk about our girl. Like, she's reading books on ancient Egypt." Like. So I was just that kid that was fun for me, and I became obsessed with it. At the same time, I was put into a reading group that was just me and one other boy, and I laugh because he's like literally still my best guy friend to this day. I was literally texting him before this interview, and he's like, "Oh my god, you're crazy." But I laugh because I'm like, "You're stuck with me." So I was put into this reading group with this boy. Um, and it was just the two of us because we were both such great readers. And we were reading Charlotte's Web. And when Charlotte died at the end, I cried like the sensitive little soul that I am. And he comforted me. And I was like, "Ooh, I like this, like, funny, smart, sweet little boy." Right? Like I have a crush on him. So one day I was reading, I don't know, like American Girl magazine or something like that. And it was the horoscopes. And I was like, "Oh my God, like Venus. I know Venus. What is this?" And so I got into it. But the reason I bring up the boy is because the reason I like actually got into it is because I had a crush and I wanted to know if we were compatible. And then I and then I would rip out, like, the Libra moon that I freaking am, stars of fortune, in the 7th house in Capricorn, that I am, right? This is what I mean by you just have to do what's right for you. Like, you can't how was I to know at 7 years old that that was gonna be my career, right? And how I build the life of my dreams. And I tease him about it to this day too, because he's the kind of guy who will be like, "Oh, yeah, I have, like, a Sag titty moon." I'm like, "You're a Capricorn moon," you know? Tease him to this day because 'cause I'm like, You're the reason that I'm into all of this, right? This is your fault." But yeah, I would just rip out the pages from a magazine, and I would bring them to the playground and tell my friends like, "Oh, you're a Sagittarius, he's a Leo, da 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 da," you know? Um
I'm obsessed with this.
Like, that's truly how it began, and then I just got more and more serious about it, and the funniest thing about it is literally the way that I business coach and wealth coach is actually through the lens of synastry, which is relationship astrology. So, it's really funny because it just keeps coming back around this, like, connection that we have to each other and what we activate within each other, and why we're attracted to this person or maybe this person. And again, Libra moon, like that just interests me beyond anything else. I'm so interested in that subject. Um, so yeah, even in the development of my career, like that's the basis for even, how I teach attracting your ideal clients and all of that.
That's so funny because it totally sparked a memory in me that I had forgotten about, which was all the time I spent in the aisle at Barnes and Noble looking at this specific book, which was the birthday book, where you go and you look up the birthday and it tells you the profile, your astrological profile. And I would do that for all of my friends and all of the boys that I liked to try to learn, like, are we compatible? Is this going to happen?
It's like a drug, you know?
100%. Yes, that's amazing. And so from there, you embark on this really beautiful process of using that to understand yourself and the world around you. And then how did the human design start weaving itself in there?
Yeah. So with astrology, I was actually a professional actor before I was an astrologer. So about a year into me actually having this business, because I had always just done it for fun. And about in 2017, I was like, oh, this is like becoming more mainstream and people are into this, or people are weirded out when I say that I channel, they're interested in these sort of things. So it kind of grew from there. So I was working at Anthropology as a stylist. And I'd read for all of the girls and everything. So they are well aware that this is my business and this is what I do. And one of the customers actually, she was like, "Oh, you're really into astrology. Have you ever explored your human design?" And I was like, "No, what is that? I haven't heard of that before." And she was like, "Well, it's really cool because like astrology is a part of it, but she's like, basically, you just look it up because I think you'd be into it." So I did. And originally I was like, "What is this alien language? What even is this?" And then it was like about a month later, I was listening to a podcast with Jenna Zoe, and again, this is like early days, right? So I think she was like on the Almost 30 podcast or something. Like no one was really talking about human design the way we do now and the way so many people know it now. And I was just like, "Oh, this is really cool. Like I like the way that she's describing it." So I went back to it and I looked at it again, like the actual body graph, and I was like, "Oh, this feels actually really familiar. I feel like I've used this modality before." And it's true, like, as I was learning it, it just, like, kind of kept clicking and making sense and kind of just, like, sticking with me in the same way that astrology did, where I was like, "This feels really familiar, and this feels like something that I know." Even though, human design is so funny because, like, literally right now, I'm still spacing on my incarnation cross. I have said the name, I wanna say it's the right angle cross of service, but I've said the name of my incarnation cross maybe 1,000 times in my lifetime at this point, and yet it's like, it doesn't stick with me the same way astrology does. So I'm also super transparent in that I love human design. I do consider myself a great human design coach and reader, but I do have to check my notes constantly because for whatever reason, um, my brain is always like, "Right, like gate 62." And then like the second I see it, I'm like, "That's right. Da 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 da." Versus astrology, it's like this living encyclopedia in my head that like never goes away. So I always say the reason I bring all that up is because I always say that like astrology is the love of my life. Like I'm in a marriage with astrology, and human design is kind of like the side chick where, like, I love human design also, but it doesn't hold the same, I guess, weight for me, but it has filled in pieces that astrology left open, like when I discovered my profile, or that I was a non-specific manifester. Certain things clicked in, and that's why I use both modalities.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to bring up because within both, there's so many nuances. They're both very technical. There's a lot there. And to remember that, especially for anyone who feels overwhelmed by having to learn or they're curious, but they feel like overwhelmed by the amount of information that's out there, really just take it a step at a time.
Yeah. And that's why I bring it up because I don't want people I think a lot of people get into this and they're like, "Oh my god, I have to memorize everything and I need to know everything." But honestly, the reason I bring it up is because the most important thing in human design is that you are following your strategy and authority. Because ultimately that's gonna unlock everything that's right for you. So it doesn't matter if you know all about your gate 52 or whatever, because that's just going to happen naturally as long as you're following your strategy and authority, you know?
Would you be able to give us a quick crash course into what that is today?
Yes. Yeah, it's basically it's the thing in your body that says like, "Yes, this is right for me." Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Or if you're someone who, is a reflector, right? And you're meant to wait that full lunar cycle and it's like not necessarily that you feel it in your body, but it's just like that knowing, It's just that feeling of like, okay, yes. But I think, like, the thing with it is it's so interesting because, I've talked to people who also have sacral authority and will describe it in similar ways, but it really is truly something that you have to experiment with and you have to experience. Human design is literally called an experiment for that reason because your sacral response might feel different to mine. Mine feels like, a sexy turn on, like, yes, and it almost, like, won't leave me, When something is a yes, even if it doesn't make any logical sense, like, it won't leave me alone, and I'm usually pretty excited about it, but sometimes it's things that can be a little uncomfortable, and you're like, "Oh my god, like, where did that come from?" But you
Mhm.
just trust it, and I think
Mhm.
that's the best way to describe it is it's your own, physical experience. It's your own inner knowing of, yes, this is right for me on my path.
I think that's so important to mention because it can be really helpful to look back at how you've made decisions in the past that have led you to where you are now and seeing how you responded to a specific decision and then what direction it took you in, whether you perceive it as positive or negative, and then kind of learning how to take that decision making process, experiment with it, play around with it to get you a better outcome and take it into your life now.
Yeah. 100%. 1,000%. And that's how I work with my clients on it too. It's really like both of these systems, really, but especially human design. It's more so contemplation than anything else. It's more so that exact conversation of, okay, when you made the decision to, I don't know, to marry your husband, right? How did your body feel? Where did you feel that in your body? What kind of words came through or sensations came through, right? Depending on which strategy and authority we're working with. And so if they have to make a big business decision, I'm like, "Are you feeling that similar way about this?" Because it truly is like how you do one thing is how you do everything, especially when you're doing it like by your design, like doing what feels right to you. It really should feel like that effortless, even if it's confusing or even if it doesn't make sense or whatever, but there's still that sort of lazy river of life effortlessness to it that's like, yeah, this is me. This is mine. This is what this feels like again in my body, right? Versus like what it feels like in yours or what somebody else wants you to do.
I feel like that's such an important point to make because I think with a tool like human design, we can fall into the trap of reading our profile and then trying to make decisions based on what the profile is telling you to do and labeling yourself and then reading about how other people have experienced it and trying to figure it out that way versus learning about what your profile type is and then experimenting with contemplating how you've made decisions in the past and then trying to put the puzzle pieces together of like, oh, yeah, I can connect the dot with that's how I met my husband. That's how I said yes. And also, that's how my authority responds via human design.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I always tell people with human design, like, start with easy things, you know? I'm like, because it's not just the big decisions, especially, like, if you're a sacral, oh my god, like, every single second for us is like, yes, no, yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh, you know? That's, like, the joke in human design is when Ra first started to teach it to practitioners, like, all of the sacral authorities were, like, pissing off their spouses because they made them ask, like, "Do you want cereal?" So that they could respond like, "Uh-huh, uh-uh," and there was just this continual process, right? But it's like, that's the thing is I think we get caught up in, "Oh, I have to make this, big decision," right? Or I'm waiting for this, like, big thing, and it's like, well, honestly, it's just a series of little micro decisions that lead up to those bigger ones, you know? So how you do one thing is how you do everything. Like, if you can decide on Thai or Chinese food for dinner, right? You can decide on, do I wanna live in San Diego or Philadelphia, right? So I think there's a playfulness to human design that often gets left out of the conversation, especially now that it is more mainstream. And I think for me, similar with astrology, like I learned from OG sources on these things, and then I got to observe and watch and practice and play with it and experiment, not just with myself, but with all of my clients. So I feel like I have this perspective on it that's different than a lot of coaches and readers because it's like I'm far more interested in the lived experience and the practical application of it versus this is what this gate means, da 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 da, right? Like I'm far more interested in how does that actually show up in your life, right? And how do we use that knowledge, that wisdom to live the life that you wanna live now, you know?
Mm. Oh, yes, I couldn't agree more because we have to live our humanness. We have to live this human experience. That's what we're here to do. So ultimately, there has to be a point to it.
Exactly.
And yes.
Like, I mean, Ra would always say, he's like, "The second you intellectualize human design, you're doing it wrong." Like, this
Mm.
trying to memorize every single little thing and know every single little thing and plot it and plan it, you're doing it wrong. Because it truly is an experiment. Like, you're really just supposed to experiment with it and see, like, does this even work for me? You know? Like, does this even feel good to me to be following my strategy and authority? And that deconditioning process of letting go of the pieces that aren't you.
Quick question that comes forward for me with this, which is would you consider your authority to be your unique intuition, or do you think intuition is separate?
That's a really good question. I would say it's your body intuition, you know? I would say it's your physical being, right? Like who you are in this life. Because I think you can also have like higher self intuition as well, that comes in a different kind of clair, for instance. But yeah, like I can have dreams or I can have like claircognizance. But until my sacral says yes, it doesn't make sense for me here now as Catherine in this life.
I love that. Yes, that makes so much sense. And then what you were saying about the deconditioning process, I feel like that's so important because with what we were speaking to earlier around finding your most authentic self, in order to be that person, be your true self, you have to let go of everything else that's been projected in your field and that you've learned and that you've received throughout this lifetime and others.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts for people. That's the part we talk about when we talk about like an ego death, because we don't want to demonize our ego. Our ego is just literally, again, who we are in this life, right? Our higher ego. But like, I think, I think that can be the most difficult part for people is as they find themselves, they're letting go of pieces that they thought were themselves and they're realizing like, oh, that was actually never me. That was what my mom wanted or my teacher wanted or my boyfriend wanted. So I really feel like life is a process of becoming, but it's also this process of unraveling and unbecoming because of the old paradigm, you know? And so that's part of the messiness of the new paradigm is yes, you're finding yourself, but a lot of you finding yourself is just letting go of the pieces that aren't you, you know?
Mhm. 100%. So for someone who knows they're here for more, who knows they're here for a big purpose to make an impact, but they don't really know what that is yet, where do you recommend that people begin with the tools that you work with, or what tips would you give for someone who's in that space?
That's such a great question. I think the very first thing I would look at if what you're actually really interested in is like life purpose, right? And that sort of greater reason for why am I here? What is the impact that I'm here to make? I would go straight to your midheaven because your midheaven in astrology is the like pinnacle point, highest point of the chart that has to do with your highest life purpose, right? This is how the world sees you, and most is going to see you by the time that you pass away, right? This is like the legacy that you're going to leave behind. Again, simply by just living, right? But this is the thing that your soul in this lifetime is yearning for and wants to evolve into in terms of leadership and impact and legacy. On top of that, I would look at your incarnation cross in human design because those two are pretty synonymous. So, your incarnation cross is made up of your top gates in human design. And it basically is a snapshot from the human design perspective of your highest life purpose and sort of your whole life theme and soul's reason for being here in this life. So it truly is that simple that if you're like, what is my life purpose? Like, why am I here? Like, what impact am I here to make? Those are the two places you want to look.
Wow. I believe that I am a right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix or something like that.
All the names too. Like the names are so fun.
Me too. So I can't wait to go take a look and remind myself of what that is and how that fits into what I'm working on creating now.
Yeah,
And
I love
from there, the other thing that comes up for me too is how can how would you advise someone, guide someone on really discovering what their heart wants around what's next for them in their life?
that's another really great question. Well, as far as looking at it from the astrological and the human design lens, with human design, it really goes back to strategy and authority, which we've already talked about like ad nauseum, but I could talk about all day long. With astrology, it goes back to your moon. So I always say to people, when it comes to what is the first place that I look at in my astrological chart, I'm like, we look at your moon because life is just not worth living unless your moon is satisfied. You know, satisfying your moon is what draws experiences and wealth to you and all the things that feel juicy and pleasurable and comfortable in a good kind of way, right? Like secure and bring you that emotional comfort and stability so that you can regulate, so that you can explore everything else, right? But it really like the building block, the foundation is your moon in astrology. So as far as your heart's desire goes, I would start there. If we're going to take it one step further, I would also look at your Venus because your Venus is what you really truly value more than anything else. And those are the two places in your chart, as far as astrology goes, that I think of when I think of like literally heart's desire. It's like the combination of moon and Venus.
That's so cool. And I feel like really helps someone with that deconditioning process because I feel like so many of us are struggling with letting go of those conditions that maybe we received in our childhood around, well, you are supposed to do this, or your mother and I, we wanted you to go to study this at school. And so therefore you have to go work in the corporate world. And we kind of have all this conditioning and programming around what we should be doing with our life that it's totally, in my opinion, new paradigm to go back to, well, what do I really want for myself? Like what brings me joy? What does my heart want?
Exactly. And I think that that's the best question we could possibly ask ourselves, you know? And I love this conversation because I was literally having this conversation with one of my best friends who's a dating coach. Because, Pluto in Capricorn has been going through my seventh house for the last, 16 years. So dating and relationships and one-to-one connections has been such a theme for me when it's like already that with a Libra moon, right? And I think it's just really interesting because I was saying to her, with my Libra moon and my Venus and Aries opposing, right? I've gone through this whole process of both contemplation, like inside of my head and just thinking about it, but also so many life experiences that have led me to a place where I'm like, okay, I want this, but without sacrificing that, And that specificity is what is so right for me that I know is not right for other people. I know that other people might just want this or that, or other people might want neither one of those things. But for me, it's like the blend of those two and where those two meet and where both are satisfied is the happy place.
Hmm. And I think it's important to discover for you, especially if again, we're talking about looking back at your own lived experience in your past and what's gotten you to where you are now, to like take a look at what you've manifested in the past and how specific you've been on manifesting those things. And where were maybe there could be opportunities where you could be more specific about what you wanted, or maybe there's room for possibility with the universe bringing you things that are unexpected that could delight you in different ways.
100%. And I think like it's one of the reasons I love these systems so much because we as humans are like little puzzles and we're contradictions. And, we might want one thing at one time in life and want a completely different thing at another. And I love being able to see, like my Virgo IC loves being able to see like the pattern recognition of why that is. And I think that's the poetry of it too, right? I think the beautiful poetry of being able to look at your life, look at your lived experience, contemplate those things, move through those things, untangle things. I think the beauty of that is that it's really poetic. There's a beautiful symphony that's going on your entire life where it's like, okay, in this chapter, let's raise the trumpets a little higher and let's bring in the harp and let's have this. And I think that's the really cool part about being a human, and being on earth, especially in this time where we do get to be fully expressed and we do get to fully express ourselves.
I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about the fact that Pluto's moving into Aquarius, because this is a big groundbreaking time, right? And we haven't spoken about that a lot on this podcast. So, can you just share with us a little bit of information around this big change from Pluto in Capricorn to Pluto in Aquarius? And what does that mean for where we're going?
Yes, I will try to make this brief because I did a 2.5 hour master class on. No, but it's a really another very great question. You're really good at asking questions. You have do you have a Gemini moon? What is it that you have again?
Yeah.
Gemini.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like the curiosity. It's great. Um, yeah, I mean, I think with Pluto in Capricorn, it's been what I call alchemy school. So it's been this period, especially for the cardinal signs, Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, who are the natural leaders of the zodiac, right? These are the folks who are responsible for building families and businesses and knowing themselves and being in relationships, right? All of the things that we kind of think of as those like societal pillars, right? So they've been the most affected, but we've all been affected by this sort of alchemical school of Pluto and Capricorn. Capricorn is the nature of things taking time and growing over time, anyways, wisdom coming with age and experience, you know? Um, and it also is this energy of societal structures, right? Now, on the shadow side, that can be very patriarchal, right? Because it's kind of got that fatherly vibe because it's ruled by Daddy Saturn. Um, but it also can be the really beautiful things too of the leadership, right? The shaman, wise woman, wise man of the village, right? Leading the village. So, this entire 16 years, we've been really grappling with those themes, right? And in a way where Pluto intensifies everything. So, Pluto is kind of like the energy, the magnifying glass. It's going to show you like the microscopic dirt under the rug that you might have missed the first time, you know? And it's also this like demolition derby. Like it's this huge bulldozer that comes in to transform, to purge, to clear, to ultimately heal and re-empower you. But like by going through that process of death and rebirth first. So when we put those themes together, that makes for a very tumultuous time, especially at the beginning. Um, it makes for a time where we're really questioning long-standing norms in our society and where we're seeing the magnification of like that patriarchal capitalistic power, right? So I feel like in the last 16 years, we've had more questions than answers on a societal level of like, this is not working, and we've been like, this is not working, this is not working, right? But it's really just been within the last few years that we've kind of started to play with different ways of being, right? Because all of these, everybody, but especially the cardinal signs, have gone through their own personal transformation that has led to things like building businesses or families or whatever that are different, right, than that traditional societal thing because they had no other choice, right? Pluto forced us into that transformation. So now we find ourselves in a place where we've been in alchemy school. We've been slowly putting together the pieces and this little drop here and that little drop there of uncovering, healing, right? These like huge societal structures, both on the micro and the macro levels, right? So I think about it like those of us who are new paradigm leaders, part of the reason that we are is because we've been like diamonds under pressure this whole time, right? Being forced to change, right, from coal into this diamond. So now we're emerging at the end of Pluto and Capricorn, having had no choice but to transform and to change. And now we're going into Pluto and Aquarius, right? And again, we've been in this space for the last few years because Pluto has been sort of in a dance back and forth, Capricorn to Aquarius. But now we're going into it for real. Like we're ending the 16-year alchemical cycle, right? And of turning like shit into gold. And we're starting the 20-year, what I like to call improv school cycle, because the basis for Aquarius is Leo. So we go back to what we were just talking about, which is what does your heart desire? What does your heart beat for? Where does your creativity come from? Right? How do you source your creativity? And connecting to the way I like to describe it is like how little kids play. So little kids play like, I'm going to be a mermaid. Okay, like I also want to be a mermaid and you're blue and I'm green and we both have crowns and our mom was an orphan and and it's and right, it's improv school. It's yes and yes and yes and yes and at the end you're like, "Oh my god, we built a story." But in the moment you're like, "Oh, we're just playing." This was just fun. This was like the thing that felt good, right? But the funny thing is that Aquarius has this reputation for being new and different and going against the norm, but it really just comes from that place of play. It comes from that place of, and this, and this, and this, and this. Because improv school will find you doing things that you never thought you would be doing. Like I used to be a professional actor, and I remember one day in improv class, like farting for like 10 minutes, like making farting noises. And I am not a toilet humor person at all, like at all. I don't find it funny. It's not my humor, but man, was it funny in that moment. And everybody was cracking up for like a good 10 minutes as I'm like, you know? And it just but that was where the improv, the craziness, the wildness, the zaniness of the yes and, yes and, yes and, yes and led. And so I was like, "Oh my god, this is not me, but it is me because I'm doing it," right? So all of this to say that we as a society are going from alchemy school into improv school, which means that there's going to be revolution. There's going to be following people who we're not the past, like, popular kids or, traditional leaders of society. We're gonna be looking towards fringe groups or groups that have been on the outside, like indigenous communities, BIPOC communities, LGBT QA communities, right, as leaders. And that is fundamentally going to change our world. We as new paradigm leaders get to do things differently because we have healed so much in the last 16 years. Now we get to play. That's my very long-winded answer for what this means.
Ooh, I that's so juicy and gets me really excited because we need things to be different. I feel like we're all itching for what's next, the change, to see big shifts. And I feel like for our generation too, we're sort of tired. We're very tired, not sort of, we're very tired of the way that things have been run on this planet since we were kids, and we're ready for our generation to kind of get in there and shake things up and see things start to take shape in a different way, possibly differently than anything that any of us could anticipate.
Oh, our world is going to look night and day different, just even in the next few years. Like, I've been telling people the combination of having Pluto and Aquarius, but also having Uranus and Gemini at the same time, like, technologically speaking, like, we're gonna be living the Jetsons, you know? Like, we are not going to recognize our world. All of our systems, everything is going to change. And I think it's not a scary thing because it's like progress is great, right? I think one of the scary things with Pluto and Aquarius, because Pluto always brings up our fears, right? That's just it's part of the deal. um, and I think the scary thing is that we just have to hold on to our humanity. We have to keep going back to again, like what separates us from the robots, for instance, right? And that's where we get this beautiful marriage with the new paradigm as human design defines it, because it's the gate mutation of the 55, which has to do with like human emotion, and human frequency. So I think like as we create these new systems and as these new technological waves come over us and everything, it really truly is connecting back to exactly what you were just saying of like, what is the world that we want to see? You know, like, what is the world that we want to build? What is that heaven on earth?
Hmm. 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 Yes, yes, yes. I freaking love that. And I couldn't agree more. And I think what's really important to know in this age of artificial intelligence and things rapidly changing is instead of outsourcing your power and having fear of things being outside of your control, which can tell you, and I'm sure you can tell us that the baby boomer generations and generations above us have a lot of fear around being out of control of how things are changing. Instead of focusing and putting your energy and tension there, focus on your path and focus on finding how you and your authentic self are meant to express yourself during these times. That's your main job. That's your role right now.
And I think be open to change. Like I said, be open to, the more like day-to-day mundane example of me like farting during improv, It's like be open to all the different ways that life is going to throw you curveballs and changes and ask you to change because that's the nature of Aquarius. That's the nature of Pluto in terms of transformation, but Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. So this is going to be like fundamentally kind of jarring to most people. Over the last year, I've seen so many people dig in their heels into the old way of being, which I really did not expect. I expected people to be more on board. And some people made away like gangbusters, honestly, with selling programs that promised, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get X, Y, and Z result. And then everybody was left feeling like even more disillusioned by that. So, what I can say to new paradigm leaders is just be open to all the different ways that our world and you are evolving and changing and growing because I think holding on to the past is really futile here, um, because it's not going to last. But I also think that, like we've been talking about, tapping into yourself and tapping into, what is my desire and what is my contribution? What do I wanna see? That's gonna be really key as you embrace those changes at the same time.
And I keep telling my clients, get comfortable with dancing in the gray
Mhm. That's such a
because yeah, the gray is the new norm. It is the unexpected and the unanticipated change and things that are, again, who knows what's going to happen. So, it's exciting. And getting comfortable with that can really open doors.
What's so funny is I've been saying the exact same thing, but I've been using, like, Technicolor.
I like that better. That's more fun.
Like, the kaleidoscope,
Yes.
Technicolor kaleidoscope, like, get more comfortable with the kaleidoscope, but exact same thing that you were just saying.
Well, it reminds me of my mom always used to play the song Age of Aquarius when I was growing up. So it reminds me of that song and the energy and the vibe of the song. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it'll be I mean, even astrology is we're already seeing such a huge rise in astrology and astrologers correctly predicting things, the last year or so or whatever, more and more like mainstream news outlets paying attention to that and giving credence to that. So yeah, I think I don't know, it's gonna be an interesting time to be alive. Unprecedented times for sure.
I couldn't agree more. I can't wait to see what's next. And so to kind of wrap us up today, I would love to know how can you help the new paradigm leader on the next stage of their journey? What kind of stuff do you have going on in your biz? We would love to hear.
Yeah. Well, like everybody else, I'm evolving and changing and growing. So at the time that you're listening to this, depending on when you're listening to it, I don't know what I'm going to be offering in terms of, the current offer, but I do have some evergreen offers that I know aren't going away anytime soon. But definitely, you can check my website. I also love when people DM me and just say, like, hey, I want to work with you. What do you think a good way to start to do that is because being the MG that I am, I do have like so much, So I really like helping people find the right fit for them. Because again, one person is going to want to jump into the mastermind, one person is going to want to, take a course or a class or whatever. Um, but yeah, so that's the best way I think to start working with me. I do, for your listeners, have one of my favorite sessions. It's like saying like your favorite baby. But I do have one of my favorite sessions, which is the Astro Wealth Code call. And this is where we go over your unique wealth code, whether you have a business or, a different career or you're just a leader of any kind. And it goes beyond just the financial aspect of it and money, but we do cover a lot of that as well within that call. But it truly is like, spiritual, financial, holistic wealth, which is just truly my jam. Like I'm very into that. So I do have that for your listeners specifically. I'm giving them $100 off with code MYSTIC, all in caps, on the Astro Wealth Code call. And that's 90 minutes one-to-one to be able to discover your unique wealth code because it might be or it might not be what you think it is.
I love that. And I can attest to working with Katherine. She's amazing. She's a wealth of knowledge. So you're going to learn so much more about yourself in a session. And it also confirms a lot of cool things that you kind of already knew, but kind of needed someone to explain to you in a different way, which I love. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and I love, like, connecting people too, I love part of, like, even my incarnation cross, I always think of my incarnation cross as sort of like the heaven on earth cross because it's really just like, "Hey," for you, connecting with someone who does breath work is gonna be amazing, and I have tons of those contacts. So, I love, like, genuinely moving the needle for people and, like, helping them progress forward in whatever it is that they're looking for. So I feel the need to say that because a lot of the feedback I've been getting from my clients lately is they're like, "I think people need to know the magnitude of what it is to work with you, even just in one session, because you were literally change someone's life for the better, like, wave your, like, magic little fairy wand, not just give them this information, but give them the tools to move forward with that, whether it's a book recommendation or a contact or, even for clients for them, I love doing that. I love being someone's lucky charm and the reason that their manifestations and dreams come true. So I feel the need to say that because my clients have been giving me that feedback a lot lately that they're like, I think you need to talk more about that because it's different than just your average reader or coach or something.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, you just have such a wide range of knowledge and experience and connections in so many things. So I love that you shared that.
Good.
And of course, you are a modern mystic. So I would love to know, what does being a mystic mean to you?
I love that. I love this question. Um, I think for me, it really just means trusting myself, you know? I think as an oracle, as a psychic, as an astrology, human design, all these readers, all the different ways that I experience my mysticism and my magic, I think it really just comes back to having fun and playing with trusting myself, trusting my life path, and I think that's true for everybody. I think it comes back to finding that magic in the mundane of, even on days when you don't think your life is going to change, like, sometimes that's when it happens, and that's, like, the fun and the play and the beauty and, like I said, the poetry, that's the movie unfolding of life. That's what
Mm.
mysticism and being mystic is to me.
Mm. And one of my favorite things that you say a lot is to find your lazy river and to move with the lazy river of life. Cause I just feel like that's the best analogy.
It's way more fun to say than just like alignment.
So true.
We should feel like the lazy river. Like we don't have to be salmon swimming upstream.
Yes. And so, do you have any final tips for us for living that mystical life floating on that lazy river of joy?
The last thing I will say that I think I say in maybe every single podcast interview that I do is if you look at anything in your chart besides like the points I've already talked about, which by the way, even with your midheaven, you might feel really uncomfortable in your midheaven because we often feel like our eyes see instead. So I just wanted to add that back to that conversation, just as a brief like side note. But the one thing I always tell people to check in their chart is their pars of fortune. And if you don't know how to do that, I do have a master class on that, and I can give you the link so you can put it in the show notes. But I just think the pars of fortune is like, honestly, I call it like the piggy bank. It's like the treasure chest in your astrological chart. And it's like the part of your chart where, again, like all the riches, all the wealth in the world unlocks and makes itself known to you. And it's something that not every astrologer works with because it is a little bit more advanced. So that's the last one I would leave people with is similar to your moon, similar to your Venus. That's one of those like really key places in your chart that it's going to click in a lot and life will make a lot more sense and you'll be able to really explore opportunities by exploring that placement.
Follow-up question for you on that.
Mhm.
I have heard that described as being a place where you are just naturally lucky and comes easily to you. Do you agree with that, or would you say it's more so a place where you should focus your time and energy because that's going to unlock other things in your life and chart, or both?
Kind of both. It's like a destiny point. There's another point, the vertex, that's your natural ascension point that I think your listeners especially would be super into exploring as well. But the Pars of Fortune is like this beautiful melding of spiritual and holistic growth and wealth, where it's like, again, even my whole story, I owe to my Pars of Fortune. Like even the way that I started doing this as a business was because of another guy, like because of those one to one connections. So I think it's like one of those things that is more so illuminating because when you see it and you look at it, your whole life makes sense. It's kind of like the four-leaf clover, that is just dotting each of those main parts of life. That it's like, hey, like go this way and go this way and go this way and go this way. And so I think being able to really see that trail consciously allows you to be more open to opportunities and experiences, or maybe even alchemizes something within you internally, right? Looking at past experiences and seeing them as more important than maybe you did in the past. So it's a really like special, sparkly little part of the chart.
Well, we're obsessed with the sparkles and the magic here at Emily the Mystic, so I love that. And the vertex point is spiritual growth. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, the vertex point is like your highest point of ascension in this life. So it's like a little portal into spiritual growth. Specifically for that one, spiritual growth, your soul's growth in this life.
Well, we talk about this podcast being a portal. So I love to end the conversation with that in mind. That's so magical. So thank you, Katherine, for bringing all of your magic and mystical energy here to the show today. It's been such a joy to have you here. Any final comments before we end the show?
No, I mean, I'm just channeling for your listeners specifically, like, trust yourself above all else. And when it comes to the conversation of intuition, like, I think you asking the questions about the heart is really key because I feel like your listeners might be a little caught up in, like, which is the intuition I'm meant to listen to. So my guides are just saying, like, go back to your heart. Like, if your heart says no, then it's a no, even if it means it's a yes later on. But that's like the final say, is go back to, yeah, that heart intelligence.
Oh, yes. Couldn't agree more. Thank you. Needed to hear that in many different ways today. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, Catherine. And the portal is now closed. The portal is now closed. Thank you so much for listening. I invite you to join our community of mystics and spiritual seekers in my Emily the Mystic membership for more content, support, and fun just like this episode. You can check that out on my website, emilythemystic.com/membership. Don't forget to send this podcast episode to a friend who needs to hear it, rate the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and follow along on my Instagram and YouTube at Emily the Mystic. Don't worry, the portal will open again soon. See you then.